Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence, we go up to all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun.
All right, guys. Today's date, July 27th, 2022, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host, the most Buchanan. How the Frack We Got Here. We do take the events of the week, try to make sense of it all. Before I do get started, guys, let you know that we are a family-friendly podcast. This intro is going swimmingly. We are a family-friendly podcast, as we try to be, but sometimes words do fly. At the same time, there may be things that might be shown that might be too graphic or too intense for younger viewers. So viewer discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. So, aside from the Mega Millions that everybody is anticipating to see who's won, and if not, Friday's going to be interesting. Aside from that, other news that we got going on, guys, again, the Democrats are in a time crunch. Keep in mind that we are nearing the end of July, and as the midterms are 2 months away and counting, they are trying to wrap up a lot of stuff before summer recess.
Capitol Hill, Congress is entering a critical 2-week stretch just ahead of their month-long summer recess. But COVID could actually complicate things right here at crunch time.
Key Democratic priorities hang in the balance right now, including bills that would lower prescription drug costs, codify same-sex marriage, and boost production of computer chips right here at home. NBC News senior congressional reporter Scott Wong is here to break it all down for us. Hey, Scott, good to see you. Let's start with that bill aimed at lowering prescription drug costs in a 50-50 Senate, just one Democratic absence that could doom the bill. So walk us through what this bill would do and also what's the possibility of it passing.
Hi, guys. Good to be with you. The prescription drug bill, is really where these absences really matter. This is the reconciliation process. And so Democrats will need every single one of those votes in order to push this reconciliation package through. Now, specifically, this bill would, do two things. It would allow Medicare to negotiate lower prescription drug prices, as well as extend Affordable Care Act subsidies for 2 years in order to lower insurance premiums. And so, look, COVID is wreaking havoc in the Capitol right now. Joe Manchin has tested positive for COVID. A number of others have tested positive. And so, Democrats will need every single member of their caucus in order to push this through. Likely, this will happen sometime next week.
Scott, we also mentioned that computer chips bill and, of course, that move to protect same-sex marriage. So how are those bills actually looking? I mean, what's their likelihood to pass at this point?
Well, let's take chips first. Right now, the Senate is holding a procedural vote to advance the computer chips bill through the Senate. It will require 60 votes. It looks like they will have that. And so, what this bill basically would do is provide $52 billion in subsidies for domestic computer chip production. And the reason that's important is it affects everything that we use in our everyday lives, from electronics to the United States military equipment. And so a number of Biden officials have said this is a national security issue. On the other issue, same-sex marriage, this is in response to Clarence Thomas writing in his concurring opinion that some of these major cases that have been precedent for decades and decades should be taken a look at. Well, the United States Senate Democrats specifically are working to bring some of those Republicans across the aisle and join forces. They will need 60 votes in order to codify same-sex marriage into federal law. Right now, they are right about 55. They have 5 Republican supporters. It's unclear at the moment where those additional 5 will come from. So that's still an open question on the issue on same-sex marriage.
All right. Scott Wong for us there on Capitol.
Okay, so there's lots to unpack there. So let's just go in the beginning. I have never understood why Congress gets to take a summer recess when they've accomplished next to nothing. Now, keep in mind what I've said about Democrats. They're going to have the hardest time during this midterm election convincing voters to give them another chance, or at least for them to keep the majority in Congress, considering the fact that a lot of their campaign promises didn't get met. They failed to increase minimum wage. They failed to get paternity and maternity leave through. They failed to get through the Voting Rights Act, the John Lewis Act, the George Floyd Police Reform Act. I mean, they failed to codify women's rights when it comes to abortion. It's, again, Democrats don't have a lot in the win column. So now that, because they didn't get anything done, despite, we can shoulder blame the Republicans for being inactive, but let's be honest, it's Republicans. If it doesn't meet their own interest, they're not going to vote on it. We can blame Manchin for single-handedly killing the most progressive bill ever submitted, progressive agenda that was ever submitted. Manchin, along with Sinema on some occasions, single-handedly killed it. Again, somebody needs to check on Kristen Sinema. We don't know where she is in Arizona, but we hope she's okay. She's gotten mighty quiet. But Manchin, who is positive for COVID, was the killer of those things. Although to Manchin, it's like, I want to say thoughts and prayers, but I don't want to lie. But that being said, though, let's look at what they're trying to push through. Drug pricing. Again, drug pricing along with Medicare has always been a big issue. But drug companies, especially health insurance companies, and of course, you know them all out there, Cigna, Aetna, United Healthcare, you know the groups. They will lobby Congress hard to make sure that Medicare cannot negotiate drug prices, nor will they be able to open up the drug market, because keep in mind, the U.S. is one of the fewest countries that have a closed-off drug market to other countries, which means that we can only deal with Canada and Mexico. But beyond that, we don't deal with anybody else. Because why? Because health insurance companies and drug companies don't like to compete, especially if they have to compete with the rest of the world. I mean, you guys have seen what happens when we run out of Bailey formula. Where do we go to go get it? Outside the country. Because again, lobbying has led to one company producing 90% of US's baby formula. And when that factory shut down, what happened? Stores got bought out. Supply was high. Supply was dang near low, and demand was extremely high. And folks were going to use that to their advantage. Again, this is what happens when, lobbying and closing out areas because, people have the checkbooks to make that happen. This is what happens. What does that have to do with Medicare drug pricing? Medicare drug pricing should have happened a long time ago. We should have opened the U.S. markets up for drug pricing and competition from all over the world. We should have done that already. Why? Because that means that you'll see lower prices, especially for those on Medicare. Those on Medicare, especially Part D prescription, a lot of the senior citizens, the baby boomers who are now senior citizens, depend on Medicare Part D for their prescription program drug costs. I mean, think of the insulin, think of the Humira, think of the various, I almost thought Nexum for heart issue, for heartburn, things of that nature. Older citizens depend on Medicare Part D prescription program for lowering drug costs. So you think this would be a no-brainer, but again, Republicans and some Democrats are in the pockets of healthcare companies to make sure that this doesn't go through, even though it should have went through a long time ago. Same-sex marriage, same deal. Again, we shouldn't be surprised by this because Roe versus Wade had been overturned. Clarence Thomas, of all people, is going to sit there and say that same-sex marriages, the decision on that's Oberfell versus Hodges, Oberfell versus Hodges, my apologies, should be revisited. Why? I mean, it's been the law of the land for quite some time. But we also said the same thing about Roe versus Wade. But this is the dangers of a conservative Supreme Court, that nobody thought that, something that was the law of the land for so long would be overturned. And yet now same-sex marriages is about to be on the same case. I'm not the only person that said this, and I'm sure other people have sat there and said this. Did you think Roe versus Wade was going to be the end? No, it was going to be the beginning of everything they want to dismantle, especially when you have an extreme Christian theology party taking over the GOP, and you have a conservative Supreme Court that has no basis, and I don't see Democrats nor Joe Biden packing the Supreme Court, or at least balancing out anytime soon. So yeah, same-sex marriage should be codified. So those people who are in those two and fit in that category won't have not only their marriages not annulled, but their health insurance, because that's a big thing. Keep in mind, guys, for the longest time, same-sex marriages were not seen as heterosexual, had not seen the same way as heterosexual marriage. It means that your spouse or partner could not get health coverage under you. And it took Overall versus Hodges to make that happen. So it's not just about recognizing the marriage, it's the fact that the same benefits as a heterosexual couple should get, also a same-sex couple should get, with no issue. That's how it should be. But also the semiconductors, again, it is amazing to me how we are so far behind, because we used to be a company of exporting. We've become a company of importing. So when it comes to semiconductors, semiconductors are needed, as they say, in everything. I mean, everything you use, from your computer, your cell phone, cars. This is the reason why so many dealers right now are waiting on semiconductors, because their cars run on them. And without those, the cars are basically just four-wheel paperweights. Now, you would think, because a lot of our semiconductor supply does come from China, that it should be a no-brainer by now that we should have sat there and said, okay, their experience is shorter in China, in Malaysia, in Taiwan, and in Japan. You think for 1 second the U.S. can go, I have a perfect way of doing an economic boom at the same time, actually reestablishing ourselves in competition. Let's build our own semiconductor factory here in the U.S. Should have been done nearly a decade ago, but I guess better late than never. And now $52 billion is about to be approved, and to have that done. And again, I got no issue with that, because that's actually an area that does help with the U.S. It does create jobs. It does bring the rest of the U.S. market back online, because so many things are needing those semiconductor chips, and that would be perfect. But here's the problem I have with Congress. For all the Democrats have tried to do, nothing was done. And yet you're allowed to go on recess. You're allowed to go on summer recess for a while the nation is running crappy. Nothing you've done. It's like, you know what? I always wondered. I understand why some people go into politics. Because you think about it, you argue, you decide, you vote, but you still get your 185 or more a year. You get your 150 to 185 grand or more, depending on your position. You still get that. You still get the benefits of being in Congress. You still get the benefits of being a politician. And thanks to Citizens United, you got unlimited dark money coming to you that does not have to be accounted for. I see why being a politician is so lucrative. But I've never understood that being a politician means that you can do absolutely nothing and get to go on vacation and still get paid for it, while the people that voted for you are trying to struggle and make ends meet, and above all else, not trying to get killed because gun laws are still way too easy. But could be just me on that. Moving right along, guys, I want to cover a story as well, because unfortunately with Brittany Griner also being stuck in Russia, more stories are coming up where it's just amazing to me that people traveling seem to forget the issue that when you go into another country, you are held by their laws. Your citizenship will not save you.
You're watching the last moment of freedom for Mark Fogel, an American teacher heading back to Moscow last August for his 10th year teaching the children of U.S. diplomats. Airport personnel going through his bags, just minutes before he was detained for carrying cannabis into the country. His sister says no one in his family has heard his voice since. All they have are letters written in Russian.
He says what he wants in English. Someone translates for him, one of his cellmates. And depending on how good their English is how accurate of a picture we get of what is happening. It's very convoluted. And it's incredibly worrisome, because we can't really there is no honest conversation. Everything goes through the censors. It's harrowing.
Fogel was convicted of smuggling drugs into Russia and last month sentenced to 14 years in prison in a high-security penal colony. His family and lawyers have said he was carrying cannabis for medical reasons, treating chronic back pain.
He made a terrible mistake by taking medical marijuana into Russia but 14 years in a hard labor camp is essentially a death sentence for him. He's 61 years old and he has a very long history of spinal injury.
The circumstances of his detention have some similarities to the arrest of WNBA star Brittany Griner. But Griner was declared wrongfully detained by the State Department less than 3 months after her arrest. Fogel's family is still waiting.
He is wrongfully detained. There's no question about it. This is an outrageous sentence.
As we learn more about the circumstances of detention, the charges, fair trial guarantees, due process or lack thereof, we are always weighing those developments against the criteria to determine whether an American is wrongfully held or not.
While Fogel was carrying about 20 grams of cannabis, much more than Griner, his American lawyer says that his sentence cannot be explained without there being a political motive.
This is a person who has served the American diplomatic community in schools all over the world for well over the majority of his career. I need my president and my first lady to stand up for him. He needs to come home.
Okay. So, how can I say this? How can I say this so very nicely? You know, a lot of people, nothing wrong with travel. You should travel, but understand where you're traveling to. Russia, the same country that is basically pulling a terrorist action and invading a country that they literally and figuratively have no ties to. They do it because they say they can. The same Russia who Putin has a love letter with Trump. The same Russia who right now we are dealing with because, again, they invaded a country that had nothing to do with them. I keep pointing, and the reason why I keep saying this is because when Americans go somewhere, you may want to go somewhere to where we are not actively engaged in a war with Russia. They may not say it. But at the same time, it's still going on. Even more so that when you go into another country, and I cannot stress this enough. When you go into another country, you are holding to their laws. Do not think that what passes, and this is the thing I want to keep saying all the time, do not think for what passes in the U.S. will pass in another nation, like Russia, like Thailand. Thailand is severely strict. Japan is severely strict. Australia is severely strict. They all have certain rules for things that they do not allow that the U.S. may allow. And as bad as I feel for Brittany Griner, she was caught with hashish oil, which again is seen as illegal contraband in Russia if you are caught with it. The same like that gentleman over there, the gentleman in that story right there, was caught with cannabis. He could have literally and figuratively, medical marijuana, all those cards and whatnot. They're great for the U.S. But when you go into Russia, different ball game. That's why I say it once and I'll say it again. That the simple fact of the matter is that when you go over to these countries, you play by their rules, especially in Russia, which will, again, we are in a war with Russia right now. Do you not think that being an American citizen will help you in Russia right now? It will hurt you. It will hurt you if you're an American citizen. Because the simple fact of the matter is, yes, they're going to make examples out of you. And as much as that sister of that detained person will cry about how this is unfair, it's their country. You really can't fight that. Well, we're waiting for him to be wrongfully detained. Help me help you understand this. How is he wrongfully detained? Did he have marijuana on him? Yes. Did he travel with marijuana? Yes. Was he caught in a foreign country that marijuana is currently contraband and should not be and is not allowed in the country? Yes. Click, 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 click. Where was he wrongfully detained? You can say wrongfully detained all you want to, but again, it's just like Singapore. Singapore is a beautiful country, but just like one American decided to spray some graffiti on an area in Singapore, you know the penalty is for Singapore? The officers cane you on the spot. No due process, no nothing. If you are caught spray painting in Singapore, they literally break out a stick and cane you on the legs for until the officer determines the punishment's been served. And American citizens or not, that's why I keep saying this entire time, you are bound by the rules of that country. No amount of State Department is going to help you. But again, it just serves a fair warning to always know where you're going, know the country, know the laws, know what you can and cannot do, and don't be stupid and forget forgetting your carry-on or forget when you get to be searched and whatnot that, oh, I still have it on me. They're not, especially in Russia, they're not playing anymore. And that alone should tell you everything that you want to know. But let's move right along, guys. Another story, like I said before, these gun stories are becoming a little too apparent now, especially now for this one woman who decided to fire her gun in a Dallas airport. And guess what? She's still alive.
A 37-year-old woman was shot by police after allegedly firing a handgun inside Dallas Love Field Airport Monday morning.
Yesterday, July 25th, at 10:57, Portia Odufua, 37 years old, arrived at Love Field Airport and exited a red Kia sedan.
The shooting took place near a ticket counter, and the woman was apparently aiming her gun at the ceiling when she fired.
The suspect walked from the bathroom to the Southwest Airlines ticketing area and says she has an announcement to make. Witnesses say Udafua started to ramble, talking about a marriage, incarceration, and that she was going to blow up the airport, and then pulls a handgun from her sweatshirt.
An officer shot Odafua in the lower extremities, and she was taken to a hospital, according to police. No one else in the airport was injured.
Odafua has been charged with aggravated assault against a public servant, and other federal charges are possible.
Now, I'm not going to lie to you guys. When I first saw that story, you're thinking what I was thinking. They took her alive, which, again, it's the mystifying part is, as I'm sure more information will come out since this is just recently breaking news about said woman. But, again, went into an airport, decided to go on a rant, showed her handgun, fired one round into the air. Officers shot her in the lower extremities. And, you know, it's torn. I'm actually torn a little bit. I'm not going to lie. Because number one, it's amazing that person was taken alive, which again, in my case, I'm thinking of a very black man that has had an encounter with police and has a very low survival rate versus a woman who went into an airport, shot around in the air, and yet is still alive because the officer aimed their lower extremities. It's amazing that if that's honestly, for that type of police work, I can live with that. You know, you shot her, but she's still going to be alive to answer for her crimes. Again, I got no issue with that. But at the same time, and I'm just going to go ahead and call this because, as I'm sure more information is going to come out, that number one, was the gun that she had, did she legally acquire it? And number two, where did she legally acquire it at? Or where did she legally acquire the firearms at? Because I can tell you for some fact, the matter is, this growing trend of people who are doing these shootings, they're not getting these guns illegally. They are legally obtaining these firearms, or somebody they know that has those firearms gets it from them. And of course, you see how it unfolds up. Thankfully, nobody was hurt except for the shooter. But again, I hate to keep sounding like a broken record, but this is the reason why gun reform is needed. Especially so the fact of the matter is that woman was able to. You don't think that airports are going to get more serious now? They're going to start having metal detectors when you walk in now, not just at the gates. I mean, I remember the time, and this may be just showing my age, but I remember the time when you could walk all the way to the gate, said person. If you were taking the person to the airport, you could literally walk them all the way to their boarding gate, hug them, tell them you love them, have a safe flight, and literally watch them board the plane. Now, you can't do it. Once they get to the security checkpoint, unless you have a ticket, you ain't going past there. And I think that women like people like that are the reason why security measures are being increased everywhere, because it has to be an answer to this growing gun violence. But it certainly is not what she did, because again, I'm still surprised she was able to at least survive that. But we'll follow it as the story comes along. But anyway, guys, for all of us who are sitting on God's hot plate, I mean by all of us in the U.S., because if it's not hot, we are definitely seeing some severe weather. And again, somebody finally had to say it, because I have been saying this entire time. The absolute reason why we are dealing with all this extreme heat in cases, these droughts that are happening in places, there's only two words, and a lot of people hate this, but it's true: climate change.
The climate crisis. John Muir Memorial Chair of Geography and founding director of the Water Resources Group, Glenn McDonald. Glenn, scientists say that climate change is making these heat waves more frequent, causing things like droughts and wildfires. Just how concerned should Americans be about the climate crisis right now?
I think they should be very concerned. I'd pick up the paper, turn on your television. Massive heat wave going from Las Vegas to the East Coast. Boston, multiple days at triple digits, breaking temperature records. The Pacific Northwest heading into another heat dome. Last year, over 90 people directly or indirectly killed by that. Lake Mead, Lake Powell, 28% capacity. The water that 40 million people depend on, threatened. And then, of course, the wildfires. Over 5 million acres in the western United States has burned already. We might be heading towards another 10 million acre record year. California, in fact, has started off slowly. So everywhere you look, there's reason for concern.
It does, and not only here in the U.S., but Europe as well. We're seeing these scorching temperatures. Now, researchers suggest that wildfire season could be prolonged because of this. Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely. We're already seeing that in California. We're having warmer winters. We're drying out faster here. So the fire season starts earlier in the spring, and then we stay hot. Those fuels are very, very dry, and it persists later into the fall. Here in Southern California, we essentially are now facing a 365-day-a-year fire season at lower elevations.
So what needs to happen here, Glenn? How do we turn the tide? What needs to be done to save our planet?
Well, there's adaptation and there's mitigation. Right? Adaptation is we're not going to dodge the bullet here. We're not going to suddenly take all the CO2 and methane and greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere and dodge this bullet. So we need adaptation. We need fire smart planning. We need replanting of trees, like the 1.2 billion tree initiative that the federal government is doing. We need all sorts of things that we can do on the ground. Better management of our water resources, for example, cutting back. But we also need to look at mitigating, which is that we're going to have to somehow decrease the load of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. That's a longer term proposition. It's going to take an international effort.
You mentioned, though, the trees being planted. President Biden saying the government will plant 1 billion trees as climate change kills our forests. But, just last week, President Biden stopped short of declaring a climate emergency, and instead he issued some modest executive orders. Do you agree with that? I mean, should President Biden have issued an emergency declaration? And what would that have really meant?
No, that's an excellent question. I mean, if we take a look at the whole a series of things which are happening right now this summer, from water resources to fire to extreme heat. I mean, this is a crisis. And I think for many climate scientists like myself, things are happening faster than we thought. On the other hand, there's a political reality that people are facing a potential recession. They are hurting at the gas pumps in a major way. They're having problems because rents are so high, housing prices are so high. And then, of course, we still are in a pandemic. How many crises can people take? And so I can also understand why the federal government is being a little bit cautious. we have a lot of, in a sense, crisis facing us right now. Climate is a big one. It's going to stay with us. We need to tackle it. But I also understand that it's one of a whole plethora of challenges that is facing this nation and the world.
And he's completely right. I'll be the first person to say it. Climate change is real. I mean, it's amazing how you can go farther back than Al Gore. I forgot the group of scientists that first did talk about climate change. But it's been talked about since the days of Captain Planet, if you want to believe it. That yes, that climate change is real, and if literally and figuratively, this current weather does not have you believe in that, I don't know what else to tell you, because the planet's not cooling off. We're heating up. I mean, even here in Tennessee, this is our going on third week of 100 record days. 100-degree record days, the third week in a southern state. I mean, if you had told me that, aside from Tennessee politicians talking about their political campaigns to rebuild the wall and not realizing that Tennessee's a landlocked state, I wouldn't have believed you. But again, unlike those politicians, climate change is very real and things must be done. President Biden should have declared an emergency. Why? Because we need to. Just in the same sense, like the green bill should have been passed, that we should have immediately cut our greenhouse gases and reduced our carbon emissions, that we should have increased our forestation instead of deforestation, that we should have looked into renewable sources and gotten ourselves off dinosaur juice by now. We should have actually done all this because, again, we are reaching the point of no return with our climate. And honestly, as a person that has locks, I am not looking forward to another summer of 100-degree days. And I would like to say that if I had to move up north to avoid it, it wouldn't help because Alaska is starting to look like Hawaii right now. And that alone says a lot. But climate change is something we definitely that our Congress, along with ourselves, should be acting on because it's going to get to a point of no return. And once we get there, there's nothing anybody else can say except, yep, we're going to be like dinosaurs. No, nobody wants to go up like the dinosaurs. But again, moving on, guys, some more news from Robb Elementary in Uvalde, Texas. This is a weird decision that has come out because right now, as we've been reporting on the Uvalde shooting, that of course cops waiting more than that, waiting 77 minutes plus in the hallway to take down one shooter. The fact that the police chief at the time, the police commander at the time, did not get the go ahead. That people on Fox News were blaming the open door and blaming marijuana and sex-starved white men to drive themselves to crazy because they're not getting the attention they need. Out of all those things, it seems that this next story from Uvalde just seems a little, odd.
District has suspended the principal of Robb Elementary School, where 19 children and 2 teachers were gunned down. Mandy Gutierrez was placed on leave with pay after an investigation found that she was aware of security problems at the school but failed to fix them. The shooter entered the building through an unlocked door. The board also announced the first day of school will be pushed back to September 6th with new security measures in place.
As we move through this summer, we are making considerable ground on improving and hardening our campuses. There's also the matter of bringing in portables and setting those up with Wi-Fi, intercom, fire, all those pieces that must be necessary. These will not be ready for our original August 15th, first day of school.
Meanwhile, School District Police Chief Pete Arredondo remains on unpaid administrative leave. He's accused of botching the response to the shooting. The district has recommended.
Okay, so this is the part I have an issue with. So the principal was suspended without pay, but yet the police chief, I'm sorry, that's wrong. The principal was suspended with pay, but it's like over security measures that she was aware of. What security measures? Because, Fox News knows, love to stand the fact of, well, the door's unlocked. That's how the shooter was able to get inside. Not the fact that school resource officers spotted him and yet he was still able to be avoided. I don't understand that. You're going to suspend the principal because what would have happened? Say the door was locked. You think a locked door would have stopped an armed guardman? Stopped him? He would have found a way in. It's just the fact that it just seems like this feels like they had to find something or someone to blame. And there was all 20 plus officers sitting in that hallway that could have stormed and probably saved a lot more lives than that were lost that day. But I still think suspending the principal was not the best way, because a lot of those parents were not looking at the principal for answers. They were looking at those officers and the police chief who was the commander on site. That's the ones they were looking for answers from. But suspending the principal, it just doesn't. It feels like more like lip service than anything. That you had to find somebody who had to be the patsy to take the fall. Whereas you have as far as the most justified person, which is the police chief, who should honestly no longer be the police chief, not after his actions. That's just me. But again, guys, for all those that just had to see it, or if you're like me in Tennessee, you see plenty of billboards with this fool's face on it. I thought, unfortunately, after the election was the last we've seen on him, but Trump actually may, and then I hate to say this, if he somehow makes the next 2 years without being in a jumpsuit, may try another presidential run. And he actually came back to Washington, and of course, like a person that just doesn't seem to know when it's his time to go, came back to the spotlight and did all his greatest hits.
The return, 552 days since leaving the White House after the deadly assault on the Capitol in his name. Former President Trump's back in Washington with a dark view of the country.
Our country is now a cesspool of crime. We have blood, death, and suffering on a scale once unthinkable.
And again, falsely claiming he won the 2020 election.
We got millions and millions more votes. What a disgrace it was, but we may just have to do it again.
Still, even in the Republican Party, Mr. Trump's been damaged by the unrelenting revelations from the January 6th committee.
President Trump summoned the mob, assembled the mob, and lit the flame of this attack.
Today's visit also shining a light on divisions within the GOP, with his running mate turned potential 2024 primary rival, former Vice President Mike Pence, in Washington as well, offering a stark contrast.
Some people may choose to focus on the past, but elections are about the future. And I believe conservatives must focus on the future to win back America.
Their dueling appearances coming just as Pence's publisher announced the title of his upcoming book, So Help Me God, where Mr. Trump's once loyal sidekick chronicles President Trump's severing of their relationship on January 6th. Among those welcoming Mr. Trump back to Washington, top Republican Kevin McCarthy, who immediately after January 6th complained, "I've had it with this guy." And Lindsey Graham, who on the night of the attack said of Mr. Trump, "Count me out," but today insisted he hopes the former president runs again.
Welcome to politics. But not surprised by Trump. Trump reminds me, you know what Trump reminds me of? He reminds me of that person that just like seems to forget that, oh yeah, the mess that was caused, I'm coming back to talk about, that was pretty much me. But, he doesn't say that. America is a cesspool of violence and destruction and just disharmony. Yeah, you caused it. I mean, it wasn't just you. I mean, you did have a Republican-controlled Senate. You did have plenty of followers and a cult-like following. But yes, when it comes all down to it, you caused it. So again, I'm not surprised by that. I'm not surprised by Mike Pence, who also is, who's also doing a 2024 presidential bid. And you don't think he won't sit there and throw Trump under the bus? Yeah, amazing. A so-called hardcore Christian and basically a person who is a walking Dorito cheese puff that was stuck under your couch, are now going to go head-to-head to explain what? Pence is going to sit there and say that Trump came unglued on January 6th, and Trump's going to sit there and say, I never liked Pence. I never liked him. He's just an unlikable guy. I never liked him. But it's also amazing how Republicans, and this is what I say about the GOP. Say what you want about the GOP, but man, they stick, when it comes down to it, they stick together. Mike McCarthy and both Lindsey Graham both said there and said they are tired of Trump. Yet when Trump comes back into the fold and brings all those people who follow him, they embrace him back like nothing happened. Lindsey Graham, well, I can't wait to work with Trump. Mike McCarthy, I think that Trump will make a great president again. Welcome to the GOP, where anything and everything, if it gets them votes, if it gets them sway, they hang on to it. Why do you think for the longest time that the GOP actually at one point embraced black people? Herman McCain, remember Herman Cain? Before he passed, remember that guy? With his, the guy who was the CEO of Godfather's Pizza, who literally sat there and was coming up with his flat 999 tax plan that he swore was fair to all, including businesses. Yeah, remember Candace Owens, that she was allowed to come speak at Turning Point USA and all this stuff, and the fact that she was trying to say that black people are stuck on a Democratic plantation and that they need to be able to run free, and then she sat there and said that Hillary wasn't that bad, and Republicans like, whoa, too much. Again, the GOP will hang on to anything and everything that brings them sway. And I am not surprised when Trump came back. What did most GOP people want to do? They wanted to
administration announced that about 340.
I'm not ready for you. Thank you kindly. But that's the thing I'm just pointing out there. That the simple fact of the matter is that the GOP will hang on to anything and everything, especially if it means they can swing this midterm in their direction, because they're expecting idiots with a short-term case of amnesia to forget that, yes, they caused this problem. Moving right along, guys, the Department of Transportation, or I should say Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, has actually, along with Biden, has announced a new initiative. However, that initiative doesn't go as far as I hoped it would go. Just saying.
The Biden administration announced that about $343 million will go to making subway and rail stations more accessible this year. The funds come from the bipartisan infrastructure bill and will go to transit authorities across the U.S. Transit officials said there are about 900 subway and rail stations with no elevators or ramps. Officials said that these stations were built before the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 and therefore aren't ADA compliant. The funding for accessibility will total $1.75 billion over the course of 5 years.
So again, the thing that bothers me, and I'm just going to be honest with you guys, the thing that honestly bothers me is that, yes, it's great that a lot of money is going to go in subway and transit systems. The problem is going to be that it doesn't go far enough. What I mean by that is, we at this point, how is it that we call ourselves one of the most advanced countries in the world, we still do not have a countrywide mass rail transit system? How is that? I always want to ask this question. Japan has one, Australia has one, the UK has one. Yet for us to be in the US, you would think by now we would have a mass rail transit system. Because if you're like me, you're not a good flyer. I hate flying. I know flying is the fastest way and to get to somewhere, and I know it's the safest form of travel. But just something about being in a tin can at 30,000 feet just bothers me greatly. But imagine again, guys, especially for all those who are traveling right now, who are literally dealing with airlines canceling, a lack of pilots coming up short, the fact that airlines are saying that they won't be able to be at full capacity again for the next 3 to 5 years. Just imagine one thing. Imagine if you did have an alternative to flying. Imagine that you could get on a bullet train that could get you that may take a little bit longer to get you there, but at least you'll still be consistent. Imagine the fact of the matter that jobs will be created from this mass transit system that goes from one side, that goes from the East Coast to the West Coast. Imagine that you can hop on a train, like I'll just use my state as an example. Imagine I can hop on a rail train in Tennessee and I can go to Nevada in a matter of hours. Just saying. And that's amazing to me that we're not doing more. Now, I understand we're in a recession. I understand that we're dealing with a pandemic. But at the same time, it's been time that we should have actually laid the groundwork for a mass transit rail system in the U.S. because it would basically make the airlines more competitive. Because right now the airlines are like, look, you trying to get to here to Chicago in a matter of hours, what you gonna do? Or you have to get from here to California in less than 4 hours. What are you gonna do? I mean, what are you gonna do? Drive? Because that's the airlines see it. The airlines see it that you literally have no other choice. But if you did, it would change our economy drastically. But again, it's wishful thinking until we actually see some progressiveness come from that. But speaking of progressive guys, for all those that are wondering about consumer confidence, it hasn't increased, especially with the fact that the school year is actually coming up for a lot of our kids. And basically, if you ain't noticed, everything has gone up but your paycheck.
Month in a row that the consumer confidence reading shows Americans are feeling the inflation squeeze.
That is the weakest level since February of last year.
Americans worried about a potential recession as they pay more for gas, food, clothing, housing, cars, just about everything. In Sacramento, Josanne English's life has come apart. After earning $100,000 a year, she lost her job, then watched her bank account eaten up by inflation. Evicted from their home, her 3 kids stayed with family, while she and her partner lived in her car.
This has been the worst, most challenging part of my life. Every day, I wonder what's going to happen next. Am I going to be able to make it? I'm living paycheck to paycheck.
The inflation effect on display in corporate results today. Walmart says Americans are buying more food, but fewer big-ticket items. Despite high demand, supply chain kinks are forcing GM to ship fewer vehicles. Shopify cutting 10% of its workforce. Now the Federal Reserve is poised to raise interest rates yet again tomorrow. What's the risk that by raising rates again, the Fed could push the economy into recession?
There's definitely a risk that these rate hikes could result in a recession. The Fed is raising rates more quickly than it has in a very long time.
This is not just a U.S. problem. The IMF is warning the world may be teetering on the edge of recession.
So again, everything goes up in your paycheck. I still find it amazing that, number one, Trump's tax cuts are still in effect. Corporations across the board are having billion-dollar profits. Even Asurion here in Tennessee, billion-dollar profits. But at the same time, guys, the problem with those billion-dollar profits, they're still cutting people. Jobs are still being cut. Paychecks have not increased. Prices across the board, from food to backpack to school supplies, are increasing. And yet, for the simple fact of the matter is, the only possible answer that could fix all of this, really and truly, giving tax cuts back to the middle class, tax breaks, incentives, increasing the minimum wage, and a windfall profits tax on these companies that would go helping low-income families. All the things that Congress could have done. However, I understand Manchin is the albatross around Biden's neck, because it's amazing how Biden was completely progressive at the beginning of his term, has now went to moderate centrist. Why? Because again, Manchin is that albatross. Should not be surprised by that. But moving right along, guys, I did want to go ahead and go to our feel-good segment, because usually on How the Frack got here, we do cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom and sometimes make you lose your faith in humanity. But hey, it is hump day. And of course, with Wednesday, tomorrow being Friday, which is Thursday, we want to leave you guys out some good vibrations. And I always love celebrating everything Black. I hold no qualms against it. I don't apologize for it. I ain't rooting for everybody Black. And it's always interesting in the wine industry, because I myself have just now dipped into wine, found out that I do like sweet wines, and especially in this case, Zinfandel. I know I'm not pronouncing that right, but I just like the way I like it sounds. Anyway, there is the first Black owner of a wine industry of St. Tropez Rosé. And again, it's always cool to celebrate those who excel in places where people don't think we do. But here's the story.
Entrepreneur Danae Burston is making headlines for creating the first entirely Black
A brand produced in Saint-Tropez. Well, now he's using his platform to make the luxury beverage industry more inclusive for people of color. ABC's Mona Kozar-Abdi has more.
I can tell you where I was the first time I ever had rosé. It's almost like when you heard that song, your favorite song, you can say where you were. For me, that's what rosé has become. It's that nostalgic moment that transports me back to Saint-Tropez for my 30th birthday party.
That's pretty bougie.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. That milestone celebration setting Donna Burston on a nearly 20-year journey to create La Fête du Rosé, a salmon pink premium wine label produced in the heart of the French Riviera.
It means the rosé party. Our tagline's it's a party and everyone's invited.
A trip inspired by this line in P. Diddy's 2002 song, I Need a Girl, Part 2.
Have you ever been to Saint-Tropez?
It's the lifestyle and culture that has kept him coming back.
This is my drink. This is my place. And Saint-Tropez is my favorite place in the world.
A place some 4,000 miles away from his native Baltimore, where Burston said he would dream of one day seeing the world. Burston was raised by his mother, who worked overnights. So as a self-described latchkey kid, he says a lot of times it was on him to stay out of trouble.
It was Baltimore during the 80s and 90s when the drug epidemic was ravaging the city. I would watch Lifestyle of the Rich and Famous every Saturday, and that was my escape. It wasn't for the wealth. It was for the eye-opening experience of seeing the world.
His introduction into the wine and spirits industry came years later while working for the luxury goods group Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy. And this is an intimidating industry. What gave you the confidence to take this on?
I was trained by the best company in the world in terms of luxury with LVMH. So I was brought up inside of that building working on their wine and spirits and then working for Jay-Z.
Burston credits his time at Jay-Z's Ace of Spades for inspiring him to disrupt a historically exclusive industry that often lacks diversity in its marketing. Can luxury and inclusivity exist in the same sentence?
People of color like luxury goods. It's just a matter of other brands welcoming them into the fold. At La Fête, we don't believe in a target consumer. It's really a psychographic play for us. Do you like this music? Do you like this food? Do you like these destinations? If so, you are the La Fête consumer.
In regards to rosé, that means moving away from the playful seasonal marketing that has led to its popularity in recent years.
We all hear that rosé in the summertime, rosé all day. We are unapologetic. We're changing when, where, and who drinks rosé. And that's been our mission since day one.
That has been the consistent messaging since the brand's official launch in May of 2019. But while the concept was decades and a life experience in the making, the future of the company was in turmoil at the blink of an eye.
We were just starting to get our feet planted well in most markets, and then the pandemic happened. March 13th, the world shut down. I probably cried for a couple of days.
Fortunately, the company's luck quickly turned around. Days into the lockdown, DJ Derek D. Nice Jones, a friend of Burston's, held up a bottle of La Fête du Rosé during his Instagram live show Club Quarantine.
Drinking rosé today. La Fête rosé. Drinking rosé today.
The same night, former First Lady Michelle Obama and Oprah attended virtually.
And at that moment, we knew we had to figure it out. So we automatically switched to a direct-to-consumer format.
Reflecting on that moment, Burston called it a blessing in disguise, but also credits his years of studying the industry for the company's meteoric rise.
You have to know the ins and outs. Really, really learn your industry and study it before taking this leap of faith.
What legacy would you like to leave behind?
Shaking this industry up, bringing more people of color into the industry, providing other opportunities for kids from HBCUs to get into the industry. For so long, they weren't aware that there were jobs in the wine and spirit space.
Oh, that's gorgeous. And thanks to our Mona for that report.
Imagine a time when beer...
Dang, got away from me. Again, you just love to see people. I love to see Black people win. I do. I love to see Black people win. I love to see when they go into areas that they didn't think we can go into, or areas nobody would ever think of, or creating their own lanes. It's just beautiful to watch. You love to see it. But that's gonna do it for this podcast, guys. I do thank you all for watching, for liking, for sharing, for letting people know this is live. I certainly appreciate that. Some shameless plugging before we do get out of here, guys. I do want to spread cheers to my buddy Big VZA. You can find him, Avon Westwood, on Facebook, Big VZA. No socials, where you can find all of his podcasts, and of course his Beats page. Again, he is back to making beats. He's a very talented producer, so definitely check him out, BigBZA on all socials for the beats, and also talk to him about purchasing them, because yes, they are for sale. Everything has a price. I'm sorry, I went Ted DiBiase for a second, but definitely check him out, BigBZA on all socials, of course, on his Facebook page, Von Witherspoon. Now, accordingly, guys, as you can see there on either IG, Twitter, Twitch, or TikTok, you can find me BlackFox447. I usually post a lot of my opinions on a lot of things. I also post my reviews on everything that I watch, see, or play. And also, I do like to post some gym stuff because I do a couple push-ups. At the same time, guys, I'm all about positivity, pushing people forward, because, again, we really need to change the culture on how we interact with each other, not just with Black people, but just people in general, because, again, we need to be kinder. I'm not saying, go all good Samaritan, but just be decent. Say hi, say hello, check up on somebody, because everybody might be fighting a battle you may not know about. And by saying hi or hello, you might do something more than just showing that you care. You actually may save a life in the process. And that's a beautiful thing, because it takes zero energy to be nice. It takes everything to be a dick. So simply put, be freaking nice. Just that simple. And of course, as you can see down there, guys, of course, the ticker down there actually shows the link. Let me go ahead and make that up a little bit bigger. Actually, that's not it. There we go. So if you copy and paste this link into your browser, it will take you to my link tree. That's the YouTube and Facebook groups for all of my podcasts. How the Frack got here, Get Bit, and of course, the Alphonse podcast. So definitely like, share, subscribe, let people know about it, because I'm just trying to make it as big as humanly possible, if I can. Like I said before. And also, like I said before, guys, let me know. Let me discuss everything that we've talked about on the show. Do you agree with my points on this? Do you disagree? I still want to know. And also, just like the show or you didn't like the show, still want to know. I only want to make it better for people to like, to share, to follow, to hopefully inspire you to get involved. That's the big thing, to get involved, to know about your current affairs, to know what's going on in your city, your state, not just at the federal level, to actually inspire you to run for office if you want to. I always say it best: if you don't like the choices that you're given, you can always run for office, and therefore no one can ever sit there and say you didn't try your best. So with that being said, also, guys, COVID is still around, which means that if you are going to be encountering large crowds, please wear a mask, please protect yourself, because COVID and Decepticon variants are still out there. And the more you protect yourself, the more you'll be able to protect others, because trust me, we still need to do that. We're not out of this pandemic just yet. The last thing I'll say about how the Frack got here, it's all about staying informed. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We are simply giving you all the information to allow you to make up your own mind for yourself, but provide a logical perspective that goes along with it. When we are informed, we're progressive. We move forward. We try to right the wrongs of our past by making decisions now that we should have done back then, like electing our first Black woman to the Supreme Court, electing our first Black woman to the Federal Board of Governors, to electing our first woman to a high-ranking position within the U.S. Navy. When we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. That's why we keep asking ourselves, why does everything go up by our paycheck? Why are we electing different politicians, but still the same old game? And most importantly, how the frack we got here? Thank you all for watching, guys. Again, let me know what you think. Aside from that, take care of yourselves and each other.